Microevolution part 1. And as you pull this out, think for me, what does the prefix micro mean? Small, right? We know micro means small and macro means big. And the next set of notes is macro, but this is micro. And so when you see microevolution, I want you to think change in DNA, right? And so let's say, this is just an example, 20% of the population in Trustful is either type 1 or type 2 diabetes. I'm just guessing, okay? And in 10 years, they think that 30% of the people in Trustful will be type 1 or type 2 diabetes. So that would be evolution. The DNA, the microevolution, Trustful evolved. Now, macroevolution is like where there's this one type of bird, and now there's 2 types of birds. Like there's a whole new species. That's macroevolution. So microevolution is change in DNA. Change in different, like if 50% of the population is heterozygous and 50% of the population is either homozygous dominant or homozygous recessive, and that number changes, now 75% of the population is heterozygous, that's microevolution. So, and that's where we're going today with microevolution. Okay, so just a reminder, you know, let's go purple. This is a gene, right? Big A, little a, that's a gene. Just the big A, that's an allele. Just the little a, that's an allele, right? So just that's a dominant allele. This is a recessive allele. So you know what an allele is, right? It's one segment of a gene. And so if you look at your notes, it says alleles are differing versions of genes. Most of us are diploid. We have 2 alleles for every gene. You have 2 chromosomes for every chromosome. What's something that's haploid? What'd you say? What's something that's haploid?
Sex cells.
Yeah, sex cells, gametes, good. What's something, does anybody remember from genetics, something I told you that was polyploidy? Bananas, good, yay, that was good. Anything that has more than 2 is polyploidy, like a banana or something like that. Okay, your notes say, you know how to get diploid, sperm and egg go together. There's a egg being covered in sperm. Okay, so somebody tell me, you already know this, what's the definition of natural selection? You just did a whole activity on natural selection. Yeah, it's survival of the fittest. It's where nature decides which genes are best. And it may be, if you're a deer, it may be best to be big and fat in the winter months. And it may be to be skinny and little because you live in Alabama, right? So it's not that certain genes are always better. Certain genes are selected for, and who gets to decide? Or what gets to decide? Nature does, right? Like temperature, rain, maybe the predator gets to decide that cracker tastes better than this other cracker, right? If you're not going to eat the monarch butterfly because it's orange and poisonous looking. So nature selects, and that's all really it says about natural selection and evolution. You know that genetics are inherited. Where'd you get your DNA from? You got it from your mama, right? Okay, and your daddy. But there's weak and strong, and the stronger genes are considered to be selected for. When I say the most fit will survive, what does fit mean? If I am more fit than Casey, what does that mean? I can make more babies, right? You get to survive means, you get to make babies and impact future generations. Okay, somebody tell me, what's a population? You know this. A bunch of the same organism, right? We are the human population. Okay, so what makes, and we kind of talked about this yesterday, what makes you and I the same population? Why are we the same species? Because we can, what'd you say? Yeah, we are Homo sapiens. What makes us that? We can make a baby. They can make a baby, right? We can produce a fertile offspring. And so, and I said yesterday, me and a Hispanic person, we can make a baby. And that makes us the same species. Me and, somebody who's really, really tall or really, really short or really, really big or really, right? Like we're all Homo sapiens because we can all reproduce. Okay, so, me and a horse, we can't make a baby because we're not the same species. Our DNA doesn't match up. Even in a petri dish, a human egg and of a different species won't make a baby because the DNA won't line up. Right? Only really, really similar species could do that, and that's outside of the body. So a population, it tells you, looking at your notes, it says populations evolve, not individuals. Populations evolve. I can't, me by myself, I can't decide to eat healthy and work out and be strong and pass down to my family. I can't evolve for the human population. If there's a mutation, it's going to take years and years and years. Populations evolve, not individuals. And that really goes back to you don't pass on acquired traits. You don't get to decide to give your babies the best traits. So populations evolve, not individuals. Where it says population genetics, a field of study that studies the trait variation rates over time within a population. And normally we're going to be talking about allele frequencies. You know what allele frequencies are, right? You know what an allele is. The word frequency is like a mathematical number. So 50% of the population is big A, little a. 25%, that's percent signs, is little a, little a. 25% is big A, big A. So that's allele frequency. Or we could say 50% of the population has at least one recessive trait. Right? So when we're talking about numbers and alleles, that's what we mean, allele frequency. Okay, and we got species, they can produce a fertile offspring. In order to be the same species, you have to have very similar genetics. In order to be the same species, we got to be able, the sperm has got to recognize the egg, the cell membrane of the egg. It's got to be able to recognize it. So genetics are very similar, and that's important. And this shows a picture of your blue-footed boobies. And you know how they do their dance. And the girl selects. Remember us talking about this with ecology? The girl selects based off the best dance, right? And, the brightest feet and the best dance. So that would be, that's natural selection. Specifically, that's actually sexual selection where just the girl gets to pick. Okay, this is showing some salamanders. And these are different species. So this is one species living here. And this is one living here and here. Why would there be different species around the geographic coast? Like around a barrier. Why would it be this way? Like if all of the, like this salamander lives right here. And this salamander lives right here. So why is it that way? And these are all different species. Like they're so different they couldn't make a baby, probably. Come on, you know the answer to this. Not natural selection. Why is this salamander best suited for this location? Yeah, environmental factors. This salamander adapted to this environment. And this salamander has adapted to this environment. Remember that Darwin said, he was like, the turtles move and they evolve or adapt. And they move and they adapt. And they move and they adapt, right? And so it's the same thing here. They've just adapted around a barrier. And so the geographic range, a population is in one specific area. And so in order to be able, if the definition is you have to be able to reproduce, well, squirrels can't reproduce on different continents. So technically they're not the same species because the squirrel it could get on a plane, but, right, it doesn't. Now humans are different. We can get on planes. We can't, like I could travel to China right now and have a little Chinese baby because I could get on a plane. But as a species, we have a global range, so we could go anywhere. Gene pools may or may not interact. Like if a squirrel in North America and a squirrel in South America, they may be so different, so adapted to their environment that their DNA won't match up. Like the sperm won't recognize the egg, and the chromosomes won't line up and release the kinetochore signal, and right? Like the DNA may be so different. Okay, where it says allele frequency, remember this is a version of a gene, so we talked about that. It is considered fixed if there is no change. So if 50% of the population is heterozygous and it stays that way, then no evolution occurred. And what populations are evolving? All of them, right? What are some things that cause evolution? What is it? Yeah, mutations, changes in DNA. What is it? Yeah, like a catastrophe could happen and just so happen to kill all the redheaded people. Like a tornado could come through and just so coincidentally they all lived in the same area. Right? So that would be like a natural disaster. Okay, this next thing is Hardy-Weinberg. Oh, there's your geographic range. Okay, Hardy-Weinberg, I want you to know this. It's always, always, always on the exam. Okay, so, and I blanked out my screen so I can draw on it. But you know that this is what kind of allele? A dominant allele. And this is a recessive allele, right? Okay, so from now on, forget big A and little a. Well, don't really forget it because it might show up on genetics. But from this point forward, if you see a P, that means dominant allele. Okay, and if you see Q, that means recessive allele. Little side note. If I had to bet $100 right now, I would. On the 6 math on the AP exam, one of them is going to be slope or rate. Know how to do that. Rise over run. One of them is going to be Hardy-Weinberg. It always is. Hardy-Weinberg will be on your mock exam Monday and your AP exam in a couple weeks. Okay, so make sure you know how to do this. And we're not going to learn it all today. But if you don't know how to do it, come see me. I can get you this one math problem. Okay, so P is the dominant allele. That's one letter. That's just a capital A. Q is the recessive allele. That's just the lowercase a. Okay, so here's what I want you to think of. If we'll say, let's say purple is dominant, and we'll say turquoise is recessive. Okay, so these are all people with genes. Okay, so if you're looking, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people in my population. And this person right here is heterozygous. This person is homozygous recessive. Can you see this? Heterozygous, heterozygous, homozygous dominant, homozygous recessive. Okay, so if we wanted to figure out what is P or what is Q, that's the frequency of the allele. All you have to do is count. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 6 people, so that means there's 12 total alleles. Right? Can you see that? There's 12 total alleles. And how many of them are purple? Or how many of them are dominant? 5. So 5 divided by 12, which is 5 divided by 12, which is 0.4, we'll say 0.42. 0.42. That's the frequency of P. Okay, how do we figure out the frequency of Q? 7 divided by 12, right? Can y'all see that? Did I count right? 7 divided by 12 equals 0.58. Are y'all with me? Everybody with me? Okay, P plus Q, so this is P, and this is Q, always adds up to 1. That's easy, y'all. If you take all the dominant alleles and you add them with all the recessive alleles, it's going to add up to 100% of the alleles. Yes? Because there's only dominant and recessive. There's 12 out of 12. If you add up the dominant and the recessive, there's 12 out of 12. Okay, so one formula you want to know is P plus Q equals 1. And all that means is, that's 100%. All that means is if you take all the dominants and all the recessives. Well, duh, that's not even a problem. Okay, the other formula that you want to know is p squared plus 2pq plus q squared equals 1. Okay, what is p squared? And you want to know what these formulas mean. You don't even want to have to look at your formula sheet. I'm telling you, it's going to be on there. Get it down pat. What is p squared? Yeah, that's homozygous dominant. So that's someone that looks like this. Right? Okay, some 2pq is going to be, that would be heterozygous. Okay, and then the q squared is homozygous recessive, right? So little letter. Yeah, if you took all the homozygous dominant people plus all the heterozygous people plus all the homozygous recessive, that's 100% of the population. That's everybody, right? You're either homozygous dominant, heterozygous, or homozygous recessive. So, now, why is this beneficial? If you know the recessive number, then you can figure out the percent of any the frequencies. Okay, so let's try one. Everybody stand up for me. Wave your arms like this, and you're going to clasp them together on 3. 1, 2, 3. You have to put your hands together. Right over left or left over right. So know right now whether your thumb is left over right or right over left, and then sit down. Just memorize that. Whether you're left over right or right over left. Okay, if you are left over right, that means you have I think that's dominant, and that really is a trait. I'm not really sure what's dominant, which one's recessive. I'm going to go with it, that's dominant. Raise your hand if you are left over right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Okay, if you are right over left, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Right? 6 out of 21 and 15 out of 21. Okay, so we're going to say left over right is dominant. Right over left is recessive. So, okay, these people right here, this 6 out of 21, they have got to be what genotype? They got to be Q squared, right? If you show or you express the recessive trait, you are Q squared. Okay, these people are either what two things? They're either 2pq or p squared, which I don't know if y'all know, but I can't solve for p or q when it looks like that. Okay, so here's what you do. Always start solving with q. Write that down. Anytime you see Hardy-Weinberg, forget what the question is. The first thing you want to do is solve for q. Solve for q. First thing you want to do is solve for q. Okay, so we know that 6, I'm going to erase the right over left and left over right because that part's not important. 6 over 21 is q squared, right? So you're going to take 6 and divide it by 21, and you're going to mash your square root button. And I got 0.53. We'll go 0.53. Okay, so that's q squared. How can I find q? You always want to solve for q first. So how do I find q? Wait a minute. Okay, 6 divided by 21 is q squared. Oh, I got you. Okay, 6 divided by 21 is 0.28. We'll say 0.29. Okay, that's q squared. How do I solve for just q now? Take square root of that. And for just q, so if I have 0.29 is q squared, to solve for just q, take the square root. And I got 0.53. That's q. Okay, so q is 0.53. How can I solve for P? Yeah, look, P, if I told you that P plus Q is 1, and Q is 0.53, what's P? Yeah, it's going to be 0.47. Now, knowing P and knowing Q, you can solve for anything. You can solve, what's P squared? How would I do that? 0.47 times 0.47. So what percent of the population is homozygous dominant? In this room, what percent of us is homozygous dominant? All I'd have to do is 0.47 times 0.47. 22% of us. Okay? What percent of us, if the question said, what percent of us is heterozygous? How would I solve that? 2 times 0.53 times 0.47 equals 49%, or actually it's 0.498, so 50% of us, right? And I could solve for Q squared also. And so here's what you want to know. Always solve for Q first, then find P. And if you know P and Q, you can answer anything the question asks you. You can get homozygous dominant, homozygous recessive, heterozygous. And we're going to practice a lot more of these before the exam. But if you have a hard time with this, if you'll look on the video list, scroll down to the bottom, and it says, if you need more help with Hardy-Weinberg, watch these videos. And there's like 5 videos on Hardy-Weinberg. And also you can come get help with me. And we're going to practice some more of these. But right now you have a math quiz. So go ahead and put your, go ahead and get video 2 out. I'm going to check those. I'm going to come around and check video 2. And you can write on the math quiz paper.